The opportunity to work on Music Hall is just such an honor. That is, historically a building that's been a part of so many of our lives, has been a staple of the Cincinnati skyline in that area, has such great history. And I think as a result, it requires a huge amount of care and consideration and thought, because I think, when I tell people what site I'm working on, they're kind of like, oh my gosh, that's incredible. And I feel that times 10, I think, with the responsibility and a feeling of really wanting to, just swing for the fences and do kind of the absolute best you can.
Cincinnati is showing how a city can become a canvas of possibility, illuminating art's power to bring communities together to collectively experience wonder and awe. Our guest today is Chaske Haverkos, director, motion designer, 3D animator, and immersive artist. He's one of 4 artists selected to illuminate Music Hall, which is not only a historic and iconic building in Cincinnati, but also the biggest canvas during Blink. Taking place October 17th through 20th for its 4th edition, Blink is a breathtaking 4-night free public festival that transforms Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky into a vibrant, open-air, immersive gallery. As the nation's largest light, art, and projection mapping experience, Blink welcomes over 2 million visitors to experience 80 stunning installations brought to life by local and international artists in an exhibition space spanning 30 city blocks. Cincinnati was also named the #1 city in the United States for street art by USA Today this year. The city's 300 awe-inspiring outdoor murals come alive in the evening during Blink. Originally from Cincinnati, Chaske is a graduate of the University of Cincinnati's Dapp School of Design. He's operated in the advertising, creative, and entertainment fields for over 15 years, working with a diversity of clients to help create rich visual content and engaging experiences for all audiences. Chaske's love of creating frames of all types, both analog and digital, in a variety of mediums and at any scale, shines through in his animations, motion graphics, and immersive installations. Today, you'll hear Chaske's journey into projection mapping and immersive art, how he integrates AI into his creative process, and his perspective on the evolving relationship between artists and artificial intelligence. We also discuss the technical challenges of working at such a large scale, his approach to crafting experiences for live audiences, and his vision for the future of immersive art. Discover how Chaske pushes the boundaries of art and emerging technology for his largest canvas to date, the facade of an iconic 140-year-old building. Enjoy.
But have you ever thought, what if this is all just a dream?
Welcome to Creativity Squared. Discover how creatives are collaborating with artificial intelligence in your inbox, on YouTube, and on your preferred podcast platform. Hi, I'm Helen Todd, your host, and I'm so excited to have you join the weekly conversations I'm having with amazing pioneers in the space. The intention of these conversations is to ignite our collective imagination at the intersection of AI and creativity to envision a world where artists thrive. Chaske, it is so good to have you on the show. Welcome to Creativity Squared.
Thank you, Ellen. It's wonderful to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you a bit more.
Yeah. So one of the reasons why I'm bringing Chaske on the show is he's an artist, which we're going to learn all about for Blink. And if you're not familiar with Blink, I just want to tee that up a little bit. It's the nation's largest light art and projection mapping experience that takes place here in Cincinnati. And really the whole city is just turned into this like immersive light art experience, which is really amazing. There's more than 80 installations over 30 city blocks. And it's really impressive. Even for like the people who've gone to Burning Man, you come to Cincinnati, you will be impressed with what's going on. And one of the key buildings is Music Hall, and Chaske actually got assigned that site for his light projection mapping project. So super, super excited about that. So we'll dive into that. But for those who are meeting you for the first time, can you share who you are and a little bit about your origin story, Chaske?
Sure. So yeah, my name is Chaske Haverkos, and I'm a local artist from Cincinnati here. My background is more kind of in the traditional design and animation realm. I was a graduate of the DAP program at the University of Cincinnati in the digital design program. So kind of had a more traditional path into the kind of graphic design and interactive design realm, but always had a strong passion for animation, motion graphics, video production, things that move, if you will. And I think that was always something that I continued to want to steer my own kind of professional endeavors towards. So the kind of quick and efficient version of that story is graduating from DAP and then, moving into that realm of more traditional advertising and marketing, working a lot more kind of in the realm of interface design and graphic design, if you will, but still kind of moonlighting and personally pursuing kind of my growth, if you will, with animation, with 3D, all of that kind of continuing to stack upon itself and eventually kind of turning into working in a video production agency, if you will, and kind of getting continued professional growth in that realm. All of that, continuing to kind of evolve and kind of grow together, leading to just the essentially kind of an emphasis, if you will, on leaning into animation, into motion graphics, and then natural segues. But the opportunity to experience Blink in 2017, I think, was really eye-opening in terms of the, as you alluded to, the incredible just activation of the entire city and just seeing, block after block illuminating with beautiful lights and murals and sound and energy, and really just kind of feeling a calling, if you will, to get woven into that and to really participate. And so, yeah, that I think has just been incredibly amazing to have something like that right here in our city. And the fact that I get to participate in that is just such an honor, and I'm really excited for this year.
What about animation are you passionate about, or what draws you to animation out of all the different design areas that you could play with?
Sure. That's kind of a fun self-reflective question, if you will. And I think that there's always been the element of time that is kind of built into, both video and animation, and the idea that things can evolve and they can continue to change, and you can continue to try to gain, the attention of the audience, or to kind of lead them in an unpredictable way, or to kind of pique their curiosity. And I think just the synergy of motion with sound and with the timing element, and I think just provides such wonderful opportunities to really kind of strike a connection with your viewer, to kind of make them feel something, if you will, and to really kind of find ways to really connect with the audience. And I think that I felt that differently with animation and with video than really, than I did with graphic design or making a poster or whatever it might be. And all of those are incredibly wonderful disciplines. But I think the realm of motion in general just has always kind of resonated with me.
And what was your first exposure to, I guess, light mapping, or like that was even a possibility to play with?
Reflecting back, in 2013, the Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra collaborated with, ArtsWave and some of the local arts organizations here to activate Music Hall with projection mapped visuals. And what that actually means is essentially, massive projectors projecting incredible amounts of lights onto, a huge, big, old, beautiful structure. But really what that provides is, an incredibly large canvas to really kind of bring to life through color and sound and motion. And that specific experience, was tailored to really sync up with the symphonic music that the CSO was providing. So that for me was kind of my first direct exposure to seeing something at that scale and feeling, the energy and the emotion and just all that can kind of come with an experience that is created like that. So seeing that in 2013, I think it was, for the first time, really kind of planted the seed of inspiration. And then they did it again in 2015, and it was really exciting to actually be able to attend that one and see it in person as opposed to watching the broadcast. So those kind of formative moments of feeling the energy, being amongst a crowd of people all kind of aligned with their excitement and enthusiasm, and understanding just really kind of what that experience could be, I think was incredibly inspiring, and in a lot of ways kind of planted, maybe kind of formative seeds of direction for me that would be followed in years to come, if you will.
From an earlier conversation when we were talking, you said like when you initially saw that first Lumino City that you wanted to be part of it or part of Blink. So what was your journey, I guess, getting involved as an artist with Blink?
Sure. So after Luminosity, I think the idea was to kind of build it out and go bigger and to kind of further activate the city, which led to the very first Blink, which occurred in 2017. So to your point, Helen, the idea of further expanding that experience and not only being at, one site with one set of visuals of one experience, but to, literally be walking block after block throughout your own city, experiencing a diversity of light installations and mural and colors and just feeling all of that positive energy, I think really, to your point, felt kind of like a home base, if you will, and a place that I needed to be actively participating in, and really, feeling a little bit of kind of almost like a FOMO to be not doing this kind of thing because it felt so very appropriate for kind of all the things that I love. So attending Blink in 2017, I think really kind of further lit the fuse or kind of threw gasoline on the fire. And I think after attending that, I was really resigned to finding a way to participate in the next one. The quick story, essentially would be really kind of self-reflecting, if you will, thinking about what I had to offer, how I could embrace that medium, what I thought I was capable of, and, really putting together a thoughtful and comprehensive kind of submission, if you will, to try to capture that spirit and a feeling of, versatility and a willingness to really take anything and just being excited at the opportunity to be part of it all. So my first participation in Blink ended up being in 2019, and I'm fortunate to be about to be part of my third Blink this year in 24.
And tell us about your current projects, because it's Music Hall. It's one of the key installations of Blink. So give us the full story. What's the inspiration? And even like the campus is so big, like the building is the campus. How do you even like start?
Yeah. There's so much to unpack from that question in a lot of ways. And I think that, the at the top level, the opportunity to work on Music Hall is just such an honor. That is, historically a building that's been a part of so many of our lives, has been a staple of the Cincinnati skyline in that area, has such great history. And I think as a result, it requires a huge amount of care and consideration and thought, because I think, when I tell people what site I'm working on, they're kind of like, oh my gosh, that's incredible. And I feel that times 10, I think, with the responsibility and a feeling of really wanting to, just swing for the fences and do kind of the absolute best you can. And I think that that's all, just further underlined when you're dealing with such a wonderful site that means so much to so many people. So at the top level, it's just, really incredible, and I'm super excited about it. To your question about how does one, kind of attack that that challenge, I think one of the really exciting and fulfilling things about projection mapping as a medium to me is just that each site is really its own unique experience, and that each creation, if you will, is really, tailored to that site. And so the way, that I end up typically working is to really spend a lot of time just kind of understanding what it is that you're even projecting onto, and what is the scale of it? What are the opportunities that it provides to do things that, you can really only do with projection mapping when you're, essentially dealing with a massive drive-in movie theater, but also one that is not flat. It's a building with texture and different materials and different targets and windows, and all of those provide such wonderful, fun opportunities to activate them or to, play with the facade or to bring different, movements to it. And there's such an immense toolkit or tool chest, if you will, and such a vast kind of opportunity when you're dealing with a building of that magnitude, and especially one that has no mural, no existing color to navigate. And naturally, physical materials meeting light is always, kind of a challenge in terms of understanding what's the color of the brick, how much light will be absorbed, et cetera. But yeah, it's, I think, such a wonderful opportunity, and you can just take it so many different directions that it really did require a lot of kind of thoughtful time spent with it to kind of figure out what are all the different things that one could actually do to make this as cool as possible.
So for our listeners and viewers, and we have a global audience who might not be able to make it to Blink, which I didn't say the dates originally. It's October 17th through 20th, so coming up really soon. Can you describe the actual experience of your piece at Blink?
Sure. Blink in general is an evening and a nighttime event. It is activated essentially by the darkness that sets in. And as, sunset comes upon the city, you see all the colors and the lights and the murals and the projection sites activated and coming to life. So essentially, if you're, walking the streets through Blink, you can almost turn in any direction and probably see, an installation, an interactive event, a projection map mural, a street performer. It's an eclectic, kind of creative, very bright and energetic experience. And more specifically, I think with my experience, just like any other projection mapped one, you're standing in front of a massive building, and suddenly it is coming to life. And I think that the idea is essentially there's, I would venture to say 500 feet away, a massive infrastructure tower set up that is housing, stacks of 4K and 8K projectors that are really blasting immense amounts of light onto this building. And what they're projecting is just an animated visual experience, if you will, each one, created by each artist uniquely. But that syncs up with a very engaging and original soundtrack to really bring to life the building and to hopefully kind of provide an experience that, blurs the line between, surreal visuals and what you're seeing the building changing, but also, moments of pure animation or pure, creativity where you're kind of hopefully blurring the line between, watching an experience that you're seeing in front of you and perhaps being part of it and feeling like you're kind of in something as well. So for me, it's always, I think, been really important to keep the experience dynamic, to keep the energy and the tempo up, and to really kind of keep the movement flowing throughout the whole piece. Because there's a lot to see and a lot to take in there. And I think that I'm always additionally tongue in cheek kind of know that I'm vying for people's attention because there's so much amazing artwork and experiences going on at Blink as well. So.
And one thing I'd love for you to share is how would you describe your aesthetic? And when you approach this project, you didn't go with the obvious projection project. So kind of walk us through, I guess, the look and the feel and even the music, which I'd love to dive into too.
Totally. At the top level, I've come to realize that the marriage of the audio and the visuals is almost kind of paramount to anything else in my pieces. And I think that it really does all start with an understanding of what is that kind of energetic tone and tempo, and what is kind of the feeling that you're trying to set for people. And then for me, I think that you can kind of identify that as perhaps like the tone, and it helps you to really feel out kind of the structure and the flow and where it can rise and fall, and how you can, kind of keep the audience both on track, but also a little bit on their toes, if you will, too. And I do think that, to your point, Helen, it's always been really fun for me to take a little bit of the kind of what are people expecting, and in how can I kind of flip that on its nose a little bit. And, I think that a good example could be thinking about the musical score for this, and knowing that you're in front of a concert hall that is, playing symphonic music regularly, and feeling like there may be a little bit of an instinct to want to, go in that direction. But my kind of feeling being that it may be a little bit more fun to have that not be the solution and not be what people are feeling or hearing, excuse me. So I think that there is always an opportunity, especially when you're creating at such a large scale, to really have some fun with kind of the expected versus the unexpected. And, speaking of the music, it's wonderful to have such a great collaborative partner to work with. When I first had the opportunity to participate in Blink in 2019, one of the first things that came to mind was the soundtrack and how that was going to help to motivate my piece and to really kind of lay the groundwork for the timing and the flow and the tempo of it. From my previous life, if you will, in the traditional advertising world, I had some connections that were formed doing original scores or doing music for commercials, things like that. So naturally, when I had the need for it, turning to the local agency that I was, both friendly and professionally connected with, that made a lot of sense. So very fortunately, each time, that I've had the opportunity to participate in Blink, I've been able to turn to Play, which is the local sound agency that I work with. And those guys have been just incredibly supportive, but also, artistically kind of resonant, if you will. And I think that it's been easy for us to kind of align together in terms of really understanding this is the feeling that I have for it. How does that translate in an auditory way or a musical way? And so kind of looping back around to your original question, Helen, the idea that you have somebody that you can work with that has that kind of sixth sense for your inclinations or understanding when you say, melancholy, that you don't necessarily mean sad, but you mean a little bit of kind of in the middle, if you will. And so working with, Adam and Drew and Anne has just been really wonderful. And I think it's really rewarding for us to, work on something that is purely creative in a lot of ways. And I always think that it's really fun to hopefully be able to provide them the opportunity to create some really creative, original music that perhaps kind of speaks to them the way that my freedom to create Blink visuals kind of in my vision is provided to me as well. So yeah, the end result is I think the mood and the tone of this was always meant to not necessarily be kind of ominous or dark or tenuous or anything like that. But I also, wanted to make sure that it was not perpetually sunny. And I think that there's always kind of a rhythm that you can provide an audience and times that you can allow them to catch their breath a little bit or kind of react to what they've seen or to cool down before you kind of ramp back up again. And so I think the tone has always been intended to be, a little bit on the edge of dramatic, but also, allowing people, moments just to smile and have fun too. So it's definitely intended to catch your ear and to kind of drive the piece and to motivate the whole thing. And it really turned out really nicely. And I'm, super excited about the track that was ended up created.
And I'll do a shout out to Play as well, because they're the podcast agency that produces this show, and Drew is on the line with us now producing. So big fans of them, and just prepping for this interview, I'm so excited to see your piece. And how would you describe your aesthetic?
That is always like a really interesting kind of self-reflective question to try to kind of zone in on, what is that kind of stylistic realm that you like to operate in? I think in thinking about that question, it almost kind of makes me reflect on the past decade, if you will, almost, and the idea of the evolution from not necessarily from designer to artist, but that differentiation between the skill sets required for both. And the idea being that, as a freelance designer or motion graphics artist, I think I take a lot of pride in being able to kind of accommodate any aesthetic, to be able to operate in any stylistic realm and to create whatever the client wants you to create. But that also is a little bit different from, where you might personally take your color palette if you could do whatever you wanted to. And so the idea of kind of asking, what is your aesthetic or kind of your zone of operation is an interesting one, and not something that, really you get to just kind of have free reign to run with oftentimes. So I do think, that element is one of the, more cherished parts about Blink is I think really the creative freedom that we are provided. But my own aesthetic, if you will, I think is kind of metaphorically tied to what I was sharing about Blink, kind of walking that line between bright colors and black, contrast between, super brights and dark darks. And I think that representatively, always gives me the opportunity to really transition from super high to super low, to keep, whatever experience it is a little bit more dynamic and a little bit less predictable. I think that I've always, enjoyed that kind of glitchy kind of textural quality that I think was kind of baked into me, being, born in the late 80s, and understanding, VHS and tape and things of that nature too. So Aesthetically, I think I kind of have a diverse taste, if you will, but I do think that, somewhere on the edge of comfortable and uncomfortable is kind of typically where I like to land.
I love that you play with tension in that way. And one thing that you shared when we were discussing your project ahead of recording is that you really want to engage the audience, and that actually growing up, your concert going experiences kind of influenced the experience that you want people of your piece to have. So I was wondering if you could kind of talk about, how you engage the audience through your piece too.
Absolutely. And I do think, as you were referring to my youth and my younger years, going to tons of concerts with my parents, my passion just for seeing live music as I got older. And I think that kind of growing realization of feeling those moments and experiencing that energy, being with a ton of other people in a moment of excitement and kind of shared, kind of concentrated energy towards something, I think kind of baked into me the understanding of just the power and the gravity that you have when you're, showing work or you're kind of connecting with groups of people. And I think that those moments and those kind of feelings early on, really kind of resonated with me, and it led me to find, I guess, great excitement and great enjoyment in kind of providing those moments for other people. And naturally, you don't usually have huge opportunities for like that when you're designing for a cell phone or, you're creating a broadcast animation. And so for me, that idea of how can you kind of bring immense energy to these pieces has always been incredibly important. And it does kind of dovetail with the idea of always kind of wanting to keep the next thing happening on the screen, or the next kind of dangling the next carrot, if you will, and always feeling really an immense need to kind of keep secondary action on the screen happening, or keep kind of the next thing on the horizon, if you will. So to your point, Helen, I think, my kind of early exposure to feeling the energy of concerts and of live experiences, and then when you meld that together with my kind of innate interest as it is, I feel like they kind of came together in a way that really allowed me to embrace, the medium of projection mapping as really kind of a natural extension of some of those experiences, and that, that rewarding feeling that comes with creating an experience for a lot of people that are all kind of focused on that same moment together.
And one of the things that you had also mentioned is that like this is your biggest canvas to date. So for like the more designers who are listening, like what was the size? And I loved how you described like the design elements of like your stack of cards as like one of the ways that you're playing with. So I'd love for you to share, just like some of the building size, but like some of the more technical aspects, I guess, of approaching this project.
Oh man, there's a couple different kind of rails, I think, that are all moving in parallel when you're trying to work on something of this scale. As I mentioned before, a huge formative element of this is the soundtrack, and really allowing that to motivate the timing and the flow and how the kind of piece is actually structured together. And, the process for me is essentially really trying to figure out kind of what is that sonic kind of playing field, if you will. What is the tone? What are the kind of musical influences or inspirations that I'm finding? What is my kind of ear hearing as I'm kind of thinking about this piece? And how does that translate into the feeling that it's going to provide the audience? So working on the soundtrack and getting that kind of going is always really important to do kind of right towards the beginning. So, creating a folder that you dump a whole bunch of inspirational tracks into is usually kind of the route that I go. And then, Adam, Drew, and Ann and I have like a really nice session, if you will, where we just kind of dig in, talk about the different elements that are resonating with me, why I like certain parts of it. And in a lot of ways, after we kind of have that moment, speaking to really the kind of creative connection, if you will, between us, but really being able to just kind of drop that off with them and be like, all right, let's see how you guys kind of interpret this and what your kind of version of that is. So that's kind of the beginning part. After I, have that in the works, if you will, I think that then it does really start to become, reading the building, understanding the site that I've been given, and in really kind of engaging with starting to understand what are the possibilities here, and how can I really use this building and the scale of it and the site that we have to its fullest potential to create, a unique and immersive experience for the audience there. So to your point, Helen, this being literally the biggest building and the biggest site that I've ever worked with and projected onto, it has both its highest of highs and also its kind of pitfalls, if you will. The only negative, naturally, just being the literal physical scale of that, and the idea that you are in a need to project massive amounts of light, hundreds of feet onto a red brick building and expect to, one, have the graphics pop, but also have the light, projected at a certain amount of brightness and lumens to actually, make it visible to the massive amounts of people that are going to be watching it. So it definitely becomes kind of a hand holding between, art and science in a lot of ways. And, I'm fortunately not tasked with doing any of the kind of math and science, if you will, to understand the technical needs for some of that, which is really incredible. But it definitely does, all kind of swirl together in terms of understanding what is possible on the site, what could you do, and so really that whole part of the process for me is really kind of limitless, if you will, and just in terms of thinking without constraint. If you think that it would be cool for the building to crumble in this section, then why not let that be part of the consideration set? And I think that the idea eventually becomes that I find enough of these really compelling and attractive ideas that I can then start to plant them on the timeline. And, to the metaphor that you had mentioned before, I think of it as like kind of building a deck of playing cards where, each idea that I have goes into that stack and they're all kind of ready and waiting. And as soon as I get the soundtrack, then really that, you listen as deeply as possible, and those moments start to reveal themselves in terms of where they should go in the timeline and, how they can connect to the music to really create that kind of like harmonious and incredibly powerful combination. I think when, audio and visuals marry together seamlessly. So yeah, short and quickly, I think that, getting that soundtrack allows me to then kind of distribute the playing cards along the timeline and then start to figure out like, what is that structure and flow? How does it rise and fall? Are there moments of incredible action and activation to the site, and then moments that contrast where it's a little bit more energetically mellow? And I think just starting to kind of build out how it's all going to feel. And so it is a really kind of involved process, and it's a lot of kind of editorial consideration, I think, as well, in terms of figuring out the structure. But man, once you kind of crack the code, so to speak, and start to feel those moments really connecting with the songs, with the song at different sections in it, it's just incredibly rewarding as well. So really excited. I think that, yet again, they teed me up with music and created an original soundtrack that just felt very at home with kind of where my heart was already at. And then it was just kind of off to the races from there on.
This is getting me even more excited to see it. And just to answer that one question I asked from my notes, it sounded like the building size, like your biggest file size ever, is 7,300 pixels, and like you were worried about the actual, like, can your computers even handle this like file size?
Yeah, I think every 2 years around this time of year, I think my computers shudder in fear, of the required rendering times and just the smoke that'll be coming out of them. But to your point, more specifically, this building is probably 2 to 3 times bigger than anything that I had previously been, working and engaging with previously. And certainly wasn't out of my capacity, but there comes with it a huge amount of weight, if you will, that comes with rendering at massive sizes. And there's truly kind of a technical consideration in terms of the time that it will take to create the graphics practically versus, what you're creatively aspiring to make. So yeah, it was, close to 8K, massive files, 24 hours of uploading to the server, for my deliverable, and all of that, I think just, adds another kind of layer of consideration, if you will, and just being like, I might want to create the scene, but if it's going to take, 35 hours to render, is that really practical? or are there other ways that I can accomplish this in a little bit more efficient time? But yeah, it was incredibly massive, and it was really rewarding to see, my ability, I guess, to create at those resolutions and to kind of accomplish that. But yeah, it all kind of scaled up the gravity of all of that, and it was proportionally as massive as the actual building is, basically.
I love it. And as you know, the show, we explored the intersection of AI and creativity. So I want to talk a little bit about AI. And I think first, how did you use AI as part of this piece? And then we'll go into your approach and stuff. Because since we're talking about your piece, let's double click into that a little bit more.
Natural segues, it definitely, AI and that whole kind of blooming around that technology and what it was possible what was possible with it creatively, I think was really starting to come to pass right around the time that I was finishing up my 2022 Blink piece. And I think that it was uniquely timed, I guess, to really provide me with these tantalizing kind of ideas of a new frontier, but also enough runway to potentially consider how could I get my arms around this, integrate it into my own workflows, and potentially, use it to my advantage to create even more visually engaging artwork. So, fast forwarding to where I'm at right now, I was, I'm trying to think of the right way to kind of convey this, but I was resigned to the idea of making this Blink piece very much a blending of styles and to really work to integrate new technology, new programs, and new skills into this piece this year. There's a couple different tracks to that endeavor, if you will, but definitely one of them was understanding kind of diffusion-based animation, how I could integrate that, how I could, learn how to use that and to basically make it my own. And I think that it does, naturally start to hit on other kind of topics of AI consideration, if you will, but essentially kind of revealing the way that I felt about it, but also understanding that I did not want to run from it. I did not want to, push back against it. And I felt like you either, embrace it or know that others will. And I think that it also just provided such incredibly tantalizing visuals. Like literally seeing what it was creating, I think was enough to inspire me to want to kind of figure out how to use this tool. So to your question, my projection map piece for Blink is a 5-minute animation, so it is a long, kind of moving piece. And I think that the stylistic qualities that diffusion-based animation are capable of right now really kind of holds hands, if you will, with some of the kind of stylistic movements and the ways that I, just like to animate as it is. So I think all in all, it is used in a very thoughtful and kind of strategic way. It was really important to me that the audience did not walk away from this feeling like it was an AI piece, if you will. And I think that if you're kind of blending it all together to where people are not able to disseminate with ease, oh, that was an AI scene and that was a 3D one, quote unquote, to me, that would be kind of like mission accomplished. And I do think that, finding harmony and blending all of this together is something that you should be doing anyway as a good kind of animator and a good, editor to make things feel harmonious. And so, yeah, it is, used in a extensive way, but I do think in a very thoughtful way as well. And so, yeah, I'm really excited about it. And I think that there's, just a lot of potential to continue to kind of get your arms around, I think, as both the technology and the mindsets evolve, if you will, too.
Yeah, I didn't put two and two together until you just said it, that the Chat GPT and Gen AI moment really did happen right after the last Blink, which was in October of 2022, because that moment happened like in November. So it'll be interesting. I was out of town for the last Blink, but it'll be interesting to hear the differences now that the Gen AI, like how it's changed Blink and how the different artists have played with it. So I'll be keeping my ears out for that, I guess. Or have you had a sense of it, like working with Blink?
A little bit. I do think that my gut instinct is that, Midjourney or some of these generative AI for images, I think, are perhaps being more used, if you will. Think of like a submission file, or creating storyboard frames or things like that. I think that there is definitely a very thoughtful kind of keeping your eye on it, if you will, especially when it comes to the curatorial team. Understanding you can churn out some really beautiful eye candy nowadays out of Midjourney, but the follow through in executing may often be a little bit out of reach. And so I do think using, I can only imagine that it's been way more democratized, or the idea of those images kind of finding their way into more and more people's submission decks, or even their work. I think is only going to probably become more and more challenging for teams as they try to parse out real skill set versus portrayed, if you will. But yeah, I know for myself at least, I think that wanting to use it kind of my way, I guess, if you will, was really kind of the most important part, and to really be able to say that what I was creating, with these tools, felt like it was my own, and not something that I was just kind of like partnering on with a computer to create graphics. But yeah, I think, to your point, Helen, it will be really interesting for me even to kind of just be walking around and to be trying to kind of drill in on what I'm seeing and how it was created. I do that anyway, but I think it's even more fun now with all the diversity of tools that people are creating with.
And you kind of started hinting at it, but I'd love for you to expand on, like, since you do use AI tools, kind of what's your approach and how do you think about working with AI in your creative process?
Sure. In an effort to kind of reflect on that, I thought that it was important to almost kind of understand how I got here, in looking back a couple years, which I think did provide a little bit of insight to really understand, like you were saying, the kind of unique synchronicity, if you will, of some of this technology appearing at different points in time in my own creative journey, if you will. And to just kind of look back and to be like, oh, so, I was using Midjourney for the first time in summer of 22 while I was preparing to show a piece in fall of 22 that was based entirely off of, 3D and traditional kind of tools, if you will. And that's funny to almost kind of reflect and to be like, I don't want to draw like this is an old paintbrush and this is like a new Porsche kind of situation. But I do think that there is almost like a little bit of before AI and after AI, just in terms of the kind of the creative world even. So yeah, I think, at that point, creating images out of Midjourney was just like, incredibly surprising. And, I think all those things that probably everybody feels when they prompt it for the first time. It also made me a little uncomfortable. I think I felt also at that same time that kind of feeling of like, is this really mine? Do I really feel comfortable taking credit for this? And in a lot of ways, I didn't, and so I think that for me as an animator and a 3D artist and an immersive designer, Midjourney was just kind of the tip of the spear in terms of understanding that if you can create incredibly beautiful still frames that eventually, you'll be able to create 6 of those frames and you can put them into 1 second and you'll have a frame of animation and it'll only go from there. And so as I was kind of looking back on it, I had Blink in 22, which was super cool. And I think that right around that time, in that, I think fall around that time was when I saw some of the first, deforum based animation, and that, essentially being just like a full run of this incredibly trippy, perpetually infinite zooming forward kind of video where, everything starts to dissolve into smaller pixels or smaller scenes. And in really like watching some of those early kind of animations, it blew my mind in a lot of ways. The computer, of course, or kind of the way that it's interpreting the flow of the information, results in transitions that are just, surreal or would be painstakingly done frame by frame in a more traditional capacity. And so, all of that to me just revealed that there was a ton of opportunity and a ton of power with these tools if you could, leverage them in kind of bottle the lightning and force it in the direction that you want to take it. And I think at that moment, if you will, it really, kind of planted the seed to be like, I need to figure out how to use this. I need to figure out how to use it in a way that feels appropriate and empowering for me. And yeah, I think, from that point on, it was just kind of like running through different hurdles in terms of technical proficiency and understanding what I actually had to do from like the user interface standpoint and just literally getting the tools set up. But also navigating kind of new technological questions in terms of graphical power and GPU and, Mac versus Windows and things of that nature, all of which kind of culminated in me basically getting a new machine and really just kind of taking the plunge towards just total, not ownership, I would say, but basically taking, AI kind of into my world, if you will, and integrating it into the array of programs and tools that I use to create the things that I guess see in my mind or whatever.
And for some of our listeners who are interested in this, let's talk about the tech stack that you play with a little bit. And you're very pro open source. You're very pro control and having it all on your computers. So what are some of the tools that you play with too?
Sure. I think you hit on a couple kind of personal kind of guidelines, if you will, or kind of ways that I think I helped to kind of understand how I wanted to interact with these tools. And at the top level, I think feeling a little bit uncomfortable with needing to lean on any sort of cloud-based service or platform or subscription-based service at the top level, which to me then meant I need to take this local. I need to have everything on my computer. I need to be able to run this, like a program like I'd run After Effects. And to not have to be leaning on Google Colab or, a whole other company or whatever it might be. So all of that kind of was one element to it. I think the other part was just like acknowledging if I wanted to do that, what that meant from a computing standpoint, and really kind of the admittance that I needed to kind of lean into the PC world, I think, to really kind of do it the right way, if you will. And then I guess the last part of that just being like, what are the models or the programs or, for lack of a better term, kind of the infrastructure that I would then be using this machine with, what is out there, what's possible right now? What are the open source models that you can actually have on your computer? Are they good enough? And essentially kind of not the arms race, but, everything's moving and growing so quickly that, what I was doing in January has certainly been, far eclipsed by now. And so I do think that just, being future proofed or thinking about the future, especially in this kind of field is really important. And the idea of basically just being able to be kind of self-sustained and to kind of take everything into my own hands, I think was always the most important part. And so, yeah, I ended up taking the plunge and getting a PC around the beginning of this year in 24. I couldn't fully kind of unplug from my Mac ecosystem. So as you can see, I have an iMac on the desk too, but I kind of run between both of them. And I do think it's kind of fun to have a workstation that is more creatively dedicated. But yeah, I could certainly get deep in the weeds in terms of the actual kind of models and programs and all the rest of that. But basically, I'm trying to kind of use and embrace this technology in a way that feels good to me, if you will. And it feels like I'm kind of operating with a measure of independence and ownership and, really a granular control of all of it. And I think that to me felt like it really needed to be the driving kind of force at the top level. If the client wants you to change the color of somebody's eyes, I think that you need to have the ability to do that if you want to actually think about this stuff as like a truly professional tool that actual, freelance animators or creatives would use. And so, yeah, that was always kind of the goal. And I think that it's been really rewarding to be able to create with it. And, I'm super excited to be able to showcase some of those visuals in the Blink piece this year.
And I want to, I guess, dive into a little bit more what you mean by control. I guess two thoughts came to my mind. One, like the machines themselves actually, hallucinate and,
right.
When they generate, it's hard to control the output depending on
Sure.
the temperature, which the interview with Lori Mazer discusses this a lot of how much do you want them, once you prompt to, have total creative freedom or to bring your vision to life. And it's hard to have consistency, but they're kind of fixing that. And then the other side of that is also how you view AI. You've said like you like control, so you don't really see it as like a partner. Like your work is your work, AI is a tool. Do you see it like getting your ideas out of your head faster, or a brainstorming tool, or is it just another After Effects in your toolkit? So I'm kind of curious of both, from like the control of how AI operates and then how you see the tool in your toolkit too.
It's that's such a fun question, because I think from my experience, it can almost exist in both at the exact same time. And it's really kind of like, what is the intended use for it in that moment, if you will. And I say that because I've used some of these workflows for like a very rapid fire kind of iterative way. Sometimes that's more kind of like a happy accident kind of situation. But I definitely have been very very targeted and very intentional with how I've used them as well. And I think that they're perhaps that kind of spectrum, if you will, is what makes it all so incredibly powerful. But speaking to the idea of control, I felt like when it comes to using AI to create imagery, I feel like the element of control is really kind of what is the point of tension for a lot of people. The idea that how much credit can you really take for it if you type in one word and it spits out an incredibly elaborate image or whatever. The inverse be if you type a script length prompt and you get a very targeted image that's very intentional. How do those intersect, and kind of where do you kind of feel that you fit in on what's appropriate with all of that? So I personally feel like the intentionality of the creation and what you get from it is really where the magic is. And in terms of the vision at the beginning translating to what comes out of it being kind of representative of the artistic vision that's woven into that, i.e. just ultimately feeling like I always needed to have more ability to steer the outcomes from these, these runs or these dreams that I'm creating, if you will. And it basically acknowledging that I do think prompting is a skill, and I do think that not everybody can, create the same images, even if they type in what they think are the same prompts, but taking that layers and magnitudes further of actually wanting to be able to control the images via what I'm feeding into it. And that, I think, is where, to me, the most power and the most kind of liberation came, to understand that, I innately have the ability to create 3D animations in all of the traditional programs that I have used, but to then use those as armatures or kind of skeletons that I can then pump into this, workflow and get, further enhanced or further diverse kind of animations or outcomes from, is just incredibly powerful. And so to me, to your point, controlling that and being able to say, I'm going to give you this, I want this to come out of it, let's see what happens, quote unquote, I think was really kind of the magic. And, as the technology continues to evolve, there's just, more and more ways that I think you can affect the outcome. And I never intend to work with this like it's a slot machine where you're just kind of hoping that you get something out of it. And I think I take a lot of pride in, not having a lot of quote unquote re-rolls where you're just kind of doing it again and doing it again and doing it again and hoping that you get something that's usable, but really, finding productive kind of time with all this and getting stuff that's really, I think, usable and just incredibly visually engaging as well.
I love all of your analogies. They're so great.
I appreciate it.
One question, because I thought it was interesting earlier in the conversation when you first had your Gen AI moment with Midjourney and kind of saw what was possible, but then you immediately put in like moving images are next, like that's next. And in working with it on this large scale project, I'd love to hear like, what limitations did you come up with? And were there things that, for the next blink or the next project that you want the tools, or where do you see the tools going? And what's still on your wish list for this like sandbox?
Totally. That's a really good question, Helen. And I think, when I was looking back at the journey, I think it was essentially like 1 year from when I created my first Midjourney image to when I think it was Runway started to do their kind of initial, image to video kind of stuff in the cloud. In that kind of moment, I think also was revelatory in terms of understanding, one, this is kind of cool that I can upload a video and it can turn it into an animation. But two, it was, like 6 frames a second, and it was horribly small, and I really wasn't happy with kind of what I got out of it. I felt like it was just kind of, throwing stuff at the wall and being like, oh, this is kind of cool. So all of that is to say that I think my kind of underwhelmed feeling coming away from that service and from that experience led me to be a little bit more resolved to kind of my own solutions, if you will, and not being kind of beholden to the rollout schedule of some other company. All of that is to kind of give context to how quickly things have moved, and to be like, some of the Gen 3 things that you can do with Runway are incredible. Or, I'm sure we've all seen some of the Sora videos that were kind of floating around there for a while. And some of the kind of, proof of concept music videos that have been done. It's all really incredible. And I do think that if probably for most kind of animators or directors or kind of creative individuals, that continued just granular control over the elements of it, I think is just the perpetual kind of wish list, if you will. For me, that's a little bit different because I feel like I have an understanding of what's going to come out of this because I am putting into it a certain, roadmap or kind of a guiding element. But, the reality is, Helen, I think just, faster models, just bigger training sets, just more kind of consistency in the images. And it's all just moving, so quickly. I think that I can't imagine, even in another year, kind of the things that will be possible because there is, from my standpoint, like such an effort by a lot of these companies too to introduce this technology to the populace, and to get users into, it is kind of a business at the same time for a lot of them too. So I think I'm just kind of intrigued to see kind of how it'll continue to grow. And I think if there can be a little bit more, what's the right word, kind of natural quality to some of the images that come out of it, because at least to my eye, I think there can still be kind of an uncanny valley or a very, kind of telltale shine to different elements of it that I think, just kind of reveal themselves as being, generated from Kling or from whatever the kind of program is. So it's all really cool. And I think it's hard to not just kind of be like, well, you might not even know what's going to be here, next or whatever it might be.
And, since you have embraced like new tools, I've seen a lot recently from CES and just all the AI things I follow on Instagram and whatnot.
Yeah.
A lot of like really interesting holographic pieces that are emerging. And I was like curious if that's something that you're interested in playing with. Okay.
The answer is yes. I think if it involves, light and form, I'm always going to be kind of intrigued by it. The idea, I guess, of kind of volumetric light has always been intriguing, and that idea of whatever we've all seen Star Wars, and having those kind of elements being there kind of in a surreal way is pretty cool. But as a projection artist, I guess, speaking of different mediums, but I've often seen, projecting onto smoke or vapor or things like that, or projecting onto water or different mediums. So I'm kind of all for whatever it might be, and I think that would be a fun challenge.
Nice. Well, we'll definitely have to bring you back on the show. And I know we could probably talk and go on and on, but
Sure.
We do try to keep it for an hour for our listeners. But before we sign off, what's one thing, if you want our listeners and viewers to remember one thing from our conversation or just in general about AI or your art or Blink, what's that one thing that you'd like them to walk away with?
Reflecting on that question, I think, for me, I think that there was an acknowledgement essentially of kind of the emotion and the tension I think that AI can bring into the creative world or, almost kind of societal at large. And I think that I was reflecting on that idea and really kind of wanting to draw a distinction to the idea that there are still, groups of people or, large swaths of creative individuals that aspire to use this technology for the better of kind of advancing creative abilities and for enhancing skill sets. And essentially that I think not everybody that wants to kind of embrace it or to learn how to use it to our benefit are kind of hollowing out the artistic or creative worlds at large. And so for me, it just was kind of like almost a mission statement to kind of feel like you're using or embracing or weaving these tools into your workflows, but doing it in a way that kind of feels like it has a little bit more integrity or perhaps kind of feels good to the way that you want to operate. So I think part of it was just almost kind of an acknowledgement that, there are some of us out here that want to kind of use this in a way that can play harmoniously with what has previously been done or the, kind of previously established norms or the different kind of small kind of elements, I guess, under the broader creative umbrella. So all of that is kind of like a way of saying essentially that, I'm an artist that uses AI. I'm not an AI artist. And that, that idea is an important one and certainly one that was helped to kind of be cultivated by our conversation here, Helen. And I think that it is important to almost kind of acknowledge that there is a difference between the two. And it's okay to be one or the other, but I think it's also, important just to acknowledge that that there are those that want to use this as a tool to enhance, not just something that we lean on.
So well said. Well, it's been wonderful having you on the show. And I know for our audio-only listeners that you're probably curious what his work looks like. So go to creativitysquared.com and we'll embed some of his work in the dedicated blog post that will go with this. And if you're in the Cincinnati area or need an excuse to come, definitely check out Blink. I'm super excited, even more excited after today's conversation. Chaske,
Wonderful.
Thank you so much for all of your time and sharing it and all of your amazing art and thoughts on today's episode.
Well, thank you, Ellen. I really appreciate it. It's a wonderful opportunity to be on here with you, and I appreciate you inviting me. It'll be awesome to share, my work with the Cincinnati community, if you will, and I'm really excited for Blink, and I'm really excited to see a lot of other people there too. So thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you for spending some time with us today. We're just getting started and would love your support. Subscribe to Creativity Squared on your preferred podcast platform and leave a review. It really helps. And I'd love to hear your feedback. What topics are you thinking about and want to dive into more? I invite you to visit creativitysquared.com to let me know. And while you're there, be sure to sign up for our free weekly newsletter so you can easily stay on top of all the latest news at the intersection of AI and creativity. Because it's so important to support artists, 10% of all revenue Creativity Squared generates will go to ArtsWave, a nationally recognized nonprofit that supports over 100 arts organizations. Become a premium newsletter subscriber or leave a tip on the website to support this project and ArtsWave. And premium newsletter subscribers will receive NFTs of episode cover art and more extras to say thank you for helping bring my dream to life. And a big, big thank you to everyone who's offered their time, energy, and encouragement and support so far. I really appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. This show is produced and made possible by the team at Play Audio Agency. Until next week, keep creating.